Grayson Manufacturing wasn't merely another company, it was a cornerstone. For more than 5 decades, its name had represented dependability, multi-million-dollar contracts, and lasting international partnerships, its headquarters stretching across 3 buildings in the city's core with over 600 employees working behind glass walls and polished wood. I, Mary Cooper, sat at a small desk wedged between the finance department and the executive meeting rooms. Nothing remarkable, no corner office, no skyline view, and yet there was one thing that made me indispensable. I knew sign language, not just enough to spell my name or offer a greeting, but fluently. I trained for years, attended night classes, practiced in silence with my own reflection, all for one purpose: to communicate with Thomas Delra. Thomas was the CEO of the Trident Group, a globally powerful conglomerate based in Montreal. Born deaf and mute, he was never limited by it. He was sharp, sharper than most, and trusted very few. Grayson's first meeting with Trident had nearly collapsed because no one on our side could communicate properly. The interpreters made him uneasy, too rigid, too rehearsed, until I stepped in, hands moving naturally, eye contact calm and respectful, and he paused before finally responding. From that moment on, I was present at every negotiation, every quarterly review, every closed-door meeting with Deloqua, and he wouldn't sign a contract unless he saw me in the room. My voice carried no authority in the company hierarchy, but my hand spoke for the firm's survival, something people in the office often forgot. I didn't have an Ivy League degree, didn't use impressive language or flaunt designer handbags, but Thomas Delqua once told me, in his quiet language, that I was the only person who ever truly understood him, and that meant more than any title ever could. In a company that large, people come and go, executives rotate, strategies evolve, but trust is far harder to replace. While I kept arriving on time, doing my work, bridging 2 worlds with my hands, I never imagined how quickly everything could begin to shift. That week, the office carried a chill not from the vents, but from the silence that follows change. On Monday morning, the announcement arrived: Grayson Manufacturing had a new CEO. His name was Marcus Bell, and his credentials read like a resume crafted to impress investors rather than colleagues. Harvard graduate, former McKinsey strategist, youngest regional director at a private equity firm, the kind of man who calculated before he listened. The company buzzed with whispers near elevators and theories traded by the printer. The executive floor suddenly sealed off for realignment meetings, one director joking that the new guy had already replaced half the boardroom chairs, and maybe a few board members too. I watched it all quietly, as I always did, keeping my focus on preparing for Trident's upcoming quarterly visit. Mr. Delqua would arrive next Wednesday, giving me just over a week to finalize visual materials, ensure the contracts were flawless, and rehearse carefully, especially around pricing tied to precision and trust, because he always said I was the only one who didn't make him feel like a business inconvenience. Then, on Thursday afternoon, my inbox chimed. Subject: Meeting request, Conference Room C, from the executive assistant to Mr. Bell. No explanation, no agenda, just a 2 p.m. slot with the new boss himself. I arrived promptly to find him already seated, reviewing a file I immediately recognized as my personnel record. He didn't look up, only tapped a pen against the folder and murmured, "Mary Cooper." "Yes," I answered. He turned a page and narrowed his eyes. "You've been here 18 years. 19 in December." He nodded, distracted. No post-secondary education, no current management title, no professional certifications. I said nothing. I had learned early in life that silence often spoke louder than defense. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me like a puzzle missing key pieces. I was brought in to restructure Grayson for long-term growth. That means standardizing roles, measuring output, and ensuring every team has leadership and credentials aligned with its function. Still, I didn't speak. I'm trying to understand where you fit into this framework, he continued. You're assigned to special accounts, but I don't see any official projects under your name. No certifications in legal compliance, HR, or communications, not even clerical supervision. That's correct, I replied carefully. He folded his hands together. Do you have any interest in being reassigned? We may have room in administrative services. I looked at him for a moment, stunned. He thought I was idle, redundant. I work with the Trident Group, I said evenly. I've been their point of contact for many years. He didn't blink. I'll review the contract. If they're still active, we'll evaluate how to formalize the relationship. Perhaps bring in someone from procurement or legal. My stomach tightened. This man, this polished stranger with a tailored suit and a strategic mind, had no idea what that relationship truly was. He saw numbers, not people, and he hadn't yet asked why the Deloqua account ran smoothly year after year. I left without protest, but my thoughts raced. He didn't know. He had no idea I was the only person in the entire company who could speak to Thomas Delqua in his own language, and he had no idea what would happen if I wasn't there when Thomas walked through those glass doors next Wednesday. The air felt heavier the following Monday, not from the weather or a faulty thermostat, but from the quiet panic that always followed when people started getting called upstairs. Folders disappeared from desks. Email accounts stopped replying. One morning, someone was sipping coffee in the break room, and the next, their nameplate was gone. I stuck to my routine, arriving early and reviewing Deloqua's last feedback on our partnership report. I still had 3 days to finalize the visual language and confirm hospitality arrangements for his visit. No one else mentioned it. They never did. His visits were treated like any other client drop-in, but I knew better. Thomas Delra came to test trust, to feel the rhythm of the relationship, and if that rhythm ever broke, so would the deal. That afternoon, another meeting request arrived. This time, the subject line was blank. Marcus Bell sat alone at the head of a long, empty conference table. He didn't offer me a seat. I took one anyway. Mary, he said, I've reviewed your internal profile further. I nodded, waiting. He steepled his fingers. I've spoken with HR and strategy, and I'll be honest with you. We're moving in a direction that requires a more professional workforce. I remained silent as he continued. Credentialed, certified, competitive. He repeated the words like a mantra. Then his gaze settled on me. You've been here 19 years, but you only completed elementary school. No college degree, no formal certifications, and you're not managing a team. There's no upward trajectory. My throat tightened, but I stayed composed. Our company requires qualified employees, Mary, he said flatly. And you don't meet modern business standards. There it was. Simple, cruel in its clarity. I'm afraid we'll have to let you go. Your position is terminated. Effective immediately. You'll receive 3 months severance and HR will handle your exit interview. I needed a moment to breathe. He still didn't know. Still hadn't asked. Still didn't understand what I truly did. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and said the only thing I could. I wish you luck with your next negotiations. He looked at me, puzzled. A brief flicker of confusion crossing his otherwise controlled expression. He wouldn't understand until Wednesday, until Thomas arrived, until it became clear that no one else in the building could understand a single word he signed. I walked out without tears. I wasn't going to give Marcus Bell the satisfaction. He saw numbers and credentials. I lived in silence, in nuance, in the flick of a finger and the pause between breaths. I returned to my desk and quietly packed the few things that mattered. A framed photo of my mother, a small ceramic cup Thomas once gave me, hand-painted. No words, just a symbol of gratitude, a soft thank you from a man whose world few had ever tried to enter. By the time I reached the lobby, no one had noticed I was gone. Not yet. But they would, and they would soon. Outside, the world looked the same, but everything felt altered. I stepped through Grayson's revolving glass doors for what should have been the last time, my bag light, my heart heavier than I expected. Not because I'd lost my job. I'd been poor before, started from less than nothing, but because of how it ended. How a man who didn't know me, didn't ask and didn't care could erase nearly 2 decades of work with a single sentence. I wasn't going to beg. I didn't tell anyone I'd been fired, not my colleagues, not the security guard who always smiled when I arrived early, not the receptionist who sometimes brought me coffee on cold mornings. Let Marcus announce it if he dared. Let the realization seep in slowly, like a leak no one notices until the floor is soaked. I knew the Trident meeting was scheduled for Wednesday, 3 days away, and Marcus and his polished executives were probably congratulating themselves for cleaning house, blind to what they'd just thrown out. I went home, but I didn't rest. That evening, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my former instructor, Carl Hartman, one of the most respected American Sign Language specialists on the East Coast, a man who'd interpreted for CEOs, senators, and medical institutions, and who once told me I was the only interpreter who listened with her heart first. I explained what happened. His voice dropped. "Let me guess," he said. "They'll be calling me soon." "They might," I replied. "I just wanted you to know I'm no longer associated with Grayson, and their new leadership sees no value in people like us." He paused. Message received. The second call was to Melinda Rhodes, a former classmate from an advanced interpreter workshop years ago, now working with legal teams in multilingual courts, known for loyalty and discretion. Same message. The third call was to Alice Freeman, Thomas Delqua's personal liaison at Trident, with whom I'd built a quiet understanding over the years. "I won't be at the meeting Wednesday," I told her. Silence. "You're not sick?" she asked softly. "No, I was let go." She didn't ask why. She understood more through silence than most people ever did through noise. "Thank you for telling me," she said, and hung up. I knew she'd tell Thomas, not directly, not with words, but with a look, a gesture, a shift in tone. Grayson had no idea how relationships worked in silence, no idea that trust isn't spoken but earned through presence and consistency. Thomas had never signed a deal without me at the table, and they would expect him to do exactly that with a stranger in 3 days. Let Marcus Bell scramble for a certified interpreter with no emotional intelligence, no connection, no ability to read between gestures. Let him explain why the one face they trusted was gone. Let him face a deaf business titan with no map, no compass, and no translator who spoke the language of nuance. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt like a stone in their shoe, unseen but impossible to ignore. I didn't chase revenge. I chose silence, their silence. And when Wednesday arrived, I knew it wouldn't pass quietly. Wednesday morning came without ceremony. No one in the building seemed tense, at least not yet. In fact, the mood along the executive wing felt oddly upbeat. Catering arrived early. The conference table gleamed under polished light. A chilled pitcher of lemon water sat between 2 sleek glasses, waiting for guests who had already crossed half the continent. At exactly 9:02 a.m., the elevator doors opened and Thomas Delqua stepped into the Grayson lobby. Tall, composed, sharply dressed in his familiar charcoal suit, accompanied only by Alice Freeman, his executive liaison. As always, Thomas carried quiet authority, never needing sound to command. "Attention." Those who had worked with him before instinctively moved aside. The front desk buzzed Marcus Bell's assistant. 5 minutes later, Marcus appeared, immaculate in his tailored blazer and self-assured confidence. "Mr. Delqua," he said, with a tight corporate smile, "welcome back to Grayson. I hope your flight was smooth." Thomas looked to Alice, who translated the greeting into signs. He offered a polite nod. Marcus turned to guide them toward the conference room. "We've prepared everything. The contract revisions should be ready for review, and our interpreter will be joining us shortly." Alice paused. "Interpreter?" she asked. "Yes," Marcus replied, already walking. "Mary, He stopped mid-sentence, brow creasing. He turned to his assistant standing just outside the room. "Get Mary Cooper in here." The assistant shifted uneasily. "Mr. Bell, Mary Cooper was let go last week." Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" "You signed off on it, sir." The silence in the hallway landed hard. "I thought she was an administrative assistant," he muttered, eyes narrowing. "Why didn't anyone tell me she was an interpreter?" "She didn't list that in her HR profile," the assistant offered weakly. "And you said—" "I said find someone with credentials," Marcus snapped. "I didn't say fire the person who manages our largest international account." Alice turned and met Thomas's eyes, signing quickly. His expression didn't visibly change, but his posture stiffened. He looked directly at Marcus and waited. Marcus lowered his voice. "Can we get another interpreter? Someone good?" The assistant hesitated. "We've contacted 3 agencies already. No one's available on short notice." "Call more. Call Carl Hartman." "We did," she said. "He declined." "Declined?" "He said he wasn't comfortable working with a company that didn't value its internal interpreters." Marcus went pale. "Then try Rhodes. Try Freeman." "Anyone." She spoke gently. "Freeman is Mr. Delquia's liaison. She's already here." Marcus dragged a hand over his face. "Anyone else? Now." Inside the glass-walled conference room, Thomas Delqua had taken his seat, hands folded neatly before him. Alice stood at his side, silent, refusing to speak for the company. That had never been her role. She would interpret, not negotiate. Marcus entered with a forced smile. "We're just waiting on one more person." Thomas made a single motion. Alice translated. "We will wait, but not for long." Panic flashed behind Marcus's eyes. He stepped back into the hall. "Do not let this fall apart. I don't care what it costs." But it was already too late. In the silent language they had dismissed, disrespected, and cut away, the damage was already done. The boardroom had never felt so still. Thomas Delqua sat unmoving, unreadable. Alice Freeman stood beside him like stone, signing his final messages without once looking at Marcus. The room's energy didn't explode. It drained steadily, like air leaking away. Marcus Bell tried everything: excuses, gifts, last-minute concessions, thin apologies. Nothing worked. Just as Thomas rose from his chair, signaling the meeting's end, the door creaked open. Every head turned. A pause rippled through the room. Mary Cooper stood in the doorway. No badge, no official authority, only a calm, steady presence. Her eyes met Alice's, then Thomas's, and without asking permission or waiting for instruction, she stepped inside and gently closed the door behind her. Marcus's face twisted with confusion and anger. "What is she doing here?" he hissed to his assistant. Mary didn't acknowledge him. She walked straight to the head of the table, faced Thomas, and began to sign. Fluid. Elegant. Intentional. Not merely translating, but speaking, explaining. Thomas tilted his head, eyes following her hands with sharp focus. Mary's demeanor never shifted. Her hands moved with grace, weaving meaning that only 3 people in the room could understand. After a moment, Thomas responded. Mary nodded and replied in kind. A rhythm formed, a calm presence returning to the room that had been missing all morning. Minutes passed. Thomas's posture eased, his expression softened. He turned toward Marcus and gave a small, formal nod. Alice spoke the words aloud. "We will proceed with signing, but this will be the final visit under the current leadership." Marcus blinked, then forced a smooth corporate smile. "Of course. We understand. We're grateful." Papers were signed. Handshakes followed, stiff and uneasy. The tension lifted, just barely. Mary stepped back without a word and slipped out before anyone could stop her. Marcus didn't thank her. He simply exhaled, wiped his brow, and muttered, "Crisis averted." That afternoon, champagne corks popped in the executive lounge. Marcus delivered a self-congratulatory speech about resilience and teamwork. A company-wide email praised leadership for saving the Trident partnership. But before the day ended, a message landed in the legal department's inbox. Subject: withdrawal of future engagement from Trident Group Legal Affairs. The letter was brief, polite, lethal. Effective immediately, Trident Group would suspend all future projects, deliveries, and planned expansions with Grayson Manufacturing. Existing contracts would be honored only to their legal minimum. No new discussions, no follow-ups, no further communication. Attached was a video file marked internal use only, security footage from the boardroom, no audio. Just Mary Cooper standing at the head of the table, signing slowly and clearly to Thomas Delqua. No one outside those three could understand the gestures, but Alice's later report clarified it. Mary had told Thomas plainly and carefully, "They fired me for not having a degree. They didn't even ask who I was." If this is how they treat people inside their walls, imagine how they'll treat you once the ink is dry. Walk away. They don't deserve your trust. Thomas had listened, smiled, and nodded. He signed only to protect existing obligations. The partnership was already dead. Marcus stood frozen, pale, staring at the screen. He couldn't speak. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was prophetic. As the footage replayed in his mind, something inside him fractured. Mary's composed face, her precise movements. The way she looked directly at Thomas while the leadership team sat clueless just feet away. He'd been outmaneuvered, not loudly, not publicly, but with a precision he never expected from someone he'd dismissed as unqualified. "This is sabotage," he hissed to no one. The boardroom was empty now except for his assistant and the strategy director, both standing stiff near the back wall. "Find her," Marcus snapped. "I want to know where she works, who she's talking to, what she's doing." "But sir," the assistant hesitated. "She didn't breach any contract. She wasn't an employee anymore." "I don't care about the contract," Marcus spat. "She humiliated this company. She humiliated me. She cost us our biggest partner." He slammed his palm against the desk. "You don't just walk in here, play the savior, and then gut us from the inside." The irony, of course, was that he had never once asked what Mary truly did in the first place. Across the city, Mary sat in a small cafe, sipping tea by the window as rain tapped softly against the glass, the sound steady, gentle, grounding. She wasn't hiding. She hadn't disappeared, but she also hadn't turned her phone on since the meeting. She didn't need to. By mid-afternoon, a courier arrived with a sleek envelope, hand-delivered to the cafe hostess. "Are you Mary Cooper?" the young woman asked. Mary nodded and opened it calmly. Inside was a handwritten letter on thick ivory paper. "Miss Cooper, we would like to formally offer you a position within the Trident Group. Your loyalty, discretion, and clarity of purpose have always defined our trust in you. We believe your values mirror our own. The role is yours, should you choose it. Respectfully, Delqua." There was no salary listed, no HR language, just the kind of message only Thomas Delqua would send, stripped of polish, grounded in respect. Mary folded the letter gently and smiled. Back at Grayson, the atmosphere deteriorated by the hour. Shareholders called relentlessly. Legal teams scrambled over potential fallout. Rumors began circulating internally, not just about Trident, but about which clients might be watching closely. Then came worse news. A mid-sized European tech supplier quietly requested to delay their next quarterly planning session. No explanation, just distance. Marcus paced his office like a trapped animal. "She's trying to destroy us," he muttered, though deep down he knew the truth. Mary hadn't done anything to them. She had simply told the truth, and that alone was enough to unravel him. His phone buzzed again, this time a call from a senior board member he couldn't ignore. When he answered, the voice was cold. "We'll need a formal statement. The press is asking about the Trident fallout. We'll review it tomorrow morning. And Marcus, don't spin it." He was losing control fast, visibly, and Mary hadn't spoken to the press, the staff, or anyone at all. She didn't need to. Marcus Bell wasn't the kind of man who slammed doors or shouted. His anger didn't erupt, it fermented. And in the days following Trident Group's withdrawal, that anger settled into something darker. Strategy. He didn't just want Mary gone. She already was. He wanted her erased. He wanted to ensure that no one, not clients, not future employers, not even her own reflection, would forget the cost of crossing him. He began by calling in a favor from Glenn Fallner, a reputation management consultant known for internal damage control. Glenn had worked with CEOs accused of embezzlement and politicians buried under ethics scandals. He was expensive, discreet, and deeply connected. "I want everything on her," Marcus said in their first meeting. "Every post, every job, every contact. I want to know who's hiring her and what they're saying." Within 48 hours, Glenn delivered a file containing Mary's personal details, work history, and a list of companies she might be connected to, including Trident, based on the courier drop-off observed earlier that week. Marcus skimmed the list, lips tightening. "Start whispering," he said. Glenn didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. Within a day, discreet calls went out to HR departments at two of Mary's former employers. Nothing blatant, nothing that could be traced, just carefully planted questions. "Are you certain she's stable? We've heard some unusual things. Odd that she never listed formal credentials. There was mention of internal disruption. Nothing official, of course." He sent a quiet, red flag email to a hiring firm in Boston. Only a few lines, no signature. "You may want to reconsider your candidate. Internal security flagged irregular behavior, unconfirmed, but potentially risky." Marcus pulled another thread as well. He had the legal team send Mary a formal notice accusing her of breaching confidentiality. It carried no real legal force, but it looked official, and he knew how quickly companies backed away when legal language appeared. "She wants to move on," Marcus muttered alone in his office. "Fine, but not without remembering what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you." He smiled thinly as he deleted her profile from the internal system, tagging it blacklisted, "Do not rehire." Then he went further. He manually altered her HR records, changing the reason for departure from executive termination to violation of conduct standards. Quiet. Buried. The kind of change almost no one noticed, unless they went looking. And if they did, the tag would surface, raising questions Mary could never predict. One afternoon, he even asked his assistant to contact a low-profile financial columnist. "Just background," Marcus said. "Just a note that we had to part ways with an employee due to internal disruption. Don't name her. Just put it out there." 2 days later, a small column appeared under the heading "Restructuring Realities." Sources at Grayson Manufacturing confirmed a recent staffing issue involving a longtime employee whose unorthodox behavior caused confusion during client negotiations. No name, but enough. Enough to seed doubt. Enough to cast a shadow Mary would feel even if no one spoke it aloud. Marcus told himself it wasn't personal. It was about restoring order, protecting the company, making sure no one followed her example. But every time he passed the empty conference room, every time he pictured her hands moving calmly behind his back, he remembered what he truly wanted: to erase the woman who exposed his ignorance with silence. The quiet that followed Marcus's whisper campaign didn't last. For a few days, he felt victorious. Reports trickled back that Mary's name had been quietly removed from consideration at 2 firms. He smiled when one of Glenn Fallner's contacts said, "She's being viewed as a risk." It fed the cold satisfaction of rewriting her legacy without her knowledge. Then the silence broke, and not the way he expected. On Monday morning, his assistant entered the office pale and rigid, holding a single envelope. "No return address," she said. "It was couriered directly to you." Marcus took it, irritated already. Inside was a single page typed in a bold, clean font, unsigned except for one name in the header: Thomas Delqua. "Mr. Bell, we are aware of your coordinated effort to damage Miss Mary Cooper's professional reputation. We consider this conduct unethical and reflective of deeper failures in leadership character. Our decision to end our partnership with Grayson Manufacturing was based on observation, not emotion. Your current actions only confirm the wisdom of that decision. Do not attempt to contact our affiliates, vendors, or mutual partners with further disinformation. All communications related to this matter are being documented. Any continued interference in Miss Cooper's professional future will be addressed through legal channels. Govern yourself accordingly." Marcus stared at the page, his expression tightening. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he stood and walked slowly to the window. Outside, the city was gray, rain smearing the glass, lights blurred and distant. His reflection looked paler, diminished. He crushed the letter in his fist, but the warning had already settled deep inside him. They knew, and they were watching. Across the city, Mary sat at a long, polished table in a quiet meeting room inside Trident Group's headquarters. Thomas Delqua was seated at the head. To his right stood Alice Freeman. To his left lay a freshly printed contract. Mary looked down at it, her expression calm, touched with quiet disbelief. Glenn didn't ask what that meant. He already understood. Within a day, discreet calls went out to HR departments at 2 of Mary's former employers. Careful questions, never direct accusations. "Are you sure she's stable? We've heard unusual things. Strange she didn't list formal credentials. Some internal disruption. Nothing official." A quiet red flag email went to a hiring firm in Boston. Unverified irregular behavior, potentially risky. Marcus pulled another lever, having legal send Mary a notice accusing her of breaching confidentiality. It carried no weight, but looked official, enough to make companies hesitate. He deleted her profile from the system, blacklisted her, manually altered her HR records to show a conduct violation, and even planted a small story in a financial column. For a moment he felt triumph, believing he had rewritten her legacy behind her back. Then the silence broke. A courier delivered a letter from Thomas Delacre. Marcus's efforts were unethical, observed, and documented. Further interference would be legally addressed. Across the city, Mary sat at a polished table in Trident Group headquarters. The title read, Director of Cross-Cultural Strategy and Inclusion. It wasn't just a job, it was a statement. Authority, a seat at the table, not merely a translator of words, but a builder of bridges. Thomas signed to her softly. "We don't erase those who stand for integrity. We build around them." Mary smiled, feeling recognition without noise, power without shouting, justice without spectacle. Back at Grayson, Marcus's corridors emptied of authority. Word of Delacre's letter reached the board. Whispers started. HR flagged concerns over altered records. Glenn stopped returning calls. Clients sought reassurance. Mary hadn't spoken to a single journalist, but her name, tied to Trident, carried more weight than any headline. A Thursday email summoned Marcus to a special board session. The next morning, he entered the room, straight-backed, but faces were distant. Polite detachment replacing respect. The chair presented findings: falsified records, defamation, abuse of access, reputational damage causing client withdrawals and pending lawsuits. Marcus was offered resignation with no severance or faced termination and litigation. Trembling, he signed the paperwork. The story he tried to control ended with ink, not applause. Weeks later, Mary stood in the same conference room, leading a seminar for Grayson executives on the cost of not listening, guiding them through the partnership that once thrived on trust, speaking clearly, without bitterness. One manager asked how she stayed calm. She replied, "I didn't stay calm. I stayed focused." Outside, whispers spread. Grayson had lost more than a contract. Marcus Bell's reputation waned. Mary Cooper had redefined qualification without raising her voice. Her story became a lesson written into reports, hallways, and quiet conversations. Silence isn't weakness, it's language.